Hello, this is Tom Turner interviewing Joe Perkins about his Chelsea Flower Show 2022 design for the Meta Garden, Growing the Future. Meta is still better known as Facebook, but now includes many other companies. Joe, good morning. Pleasure to meet you again. I think it's after 20 years and you think it's after 10 years, but so I assume you're right. Great project here. And a great client as well. I always like to look at a design myself under the three Vitruvian categories of commodity, firmness and delight: how it looks, how it's built, and how it's used. Now, as for how it's used, that's very plain to us in that we're both sitting in a comfortable place. And unlike, I would say, most Chelsea gardens, which are concentrating on how they look, yours has got a real functional basis to it, which seems very appropriate given Facebook Meta as the client. So could I ask you, of the three, which was the starting point for your design? The aesthetics, the function, or the construction?
For me, it was the construction, actually, Tom, because the garden is all about sustainability and managing our forests and woodlands to produce timber. And that's why everything in the garden, all the structures, the pavilion that's above us, the bench you're sitting on, the flooring, the steps, everything is timber. We've used absolutely no concrete at all in the construction of the garden. And so the key message really is that timber is a sustainable, renewable and beautiful building material. So the construction really dictated what we could do with the garden.
With your interest in fungi, how did that come into the design process? And also, would it be practical for somebody to use as a theme, a planting theme, in a domestic garden?
Well, fungi is a very difficult thing to demonstrate in a garden setting, particularly at a garden show in London in May. You're sitting in front of the table here, which we've called Hi-Fi, which has an amazing installation inside of it, which helps to demonstrate fungi on a visual level. But and above you, you can see the hexagonal network of lattice work of the building, and below you, you can see the hexagonal oak sets. And if you look at a cross section of a tree root under a microscope, you'll see the xylem cells are broadly hexagonal, and you can see that the way that the mycelium threads actually wrap themselves around the xylem cells, they form a broadly hexagonal net, which is called the Hartig net. So that's how we've demonstrated it in this garden. But also, and on a practical level for people, in their own gardens, it's really about the diversity of species. And you can see we've got we've got over 3,000 plants in this garden, and we've got an incredible range of species. And that's only possible in nature if you've got a functioning ecosystem and a functioning fungal network. So really, it's about diversity. And if you want to take an interest in fungi, I would say try and grow as many different species as possible, because you're creating a diverse and resilient plant community.
But what about the use of rotting organic materials to encourage the growth of fungi in a garden?
Well, incredibly important. I think as gardeners, we've historically looked at fungi as something that's to be got rid of. It's associated with decay and disease. And of course it is, because they are the great recyclers of life, but they're also the givers of life. Composted material is great. It will introduce the fungi. But also, I would say, don't dig over your borders in, every spring, because you're just destroying the fungal network. It's really a case of reversing some of what we've traditionally been told we should be doing.
Now, a more unexpected and challenging question for you. When I looked at your website, I was interested to discover that you'd studied English literature before coming into garden design. And it made me wonder that literature is classified as historical fiction, biography, literary fiction, etc. How would you classify your stylistic approach here, either as a design or as one of those categories?
It's a difficult question to answer. I mean, to answer plainly, I think so when I was studying English literature, it was the Romanticism, the Romantic poets and so on, which sparked my interest in gardens and garden design. So perhaps, it's maybe the Romantic style is something that I would say would be my style. I do like sort of delicate planting, and quite subtle and simple design, to be fair.
I'm glad you said that. I made a video recently with the title 5,000 Years of Garden History in the British Isles, and it went through the periods, relating them to art historical terms, and so prehistoric, Roman, medieval, Renaissance, Baroque, Romantic, and putting music with them as well to try and explain the mood and the artistic inspiration of the periods. So if you could have a look, I'd be interested to hear what you think. There is a video on the Romantic period in garden history. But isn't there also, another literary category is sort of sci-fi and futurology. Isn't there an aspect of looking forward about this garden more than looking back? There's quite a lot of gardens here which you could classify as historicist or, historical fiction. But I don't see that in your garden at all.
No, this is also about the future and looking at species which will be more resilient to our warming climate. Longer, drier, warmer periods. So we do have, although there's a lot of British native species here, there are mixed into the meadow. There are other species such as Gladiolus, Byzantinus, and so on, which are from further south, the sort of Pyrenean region and North America as well. So it's looking at how our landscape in the UK will change due to climate, and so that is an aspect of the future.
One last question, not specifically about your design, but there's obviously year after year an increasing emphasis on sustainability, and the RHS themselves are sponsoring a rewilding garden this year. How appropriate do you think that design theme is to domestic gardens?
I think there's a massively increased interest in sustainability. I think particularly younger generation, and there's an increased interest in gardening generally in the younger generation, because I think they're possibly realising the value of nature more than perhaps we did and previous generations did. Our place in nature and how we should work with it rather than try and command it, I think, which is historically perhaps what we've tended to do.
Do you have a garden yourself, and are you a keen gardener? And to what extent does it make use of wild and native plants?
I do have a garden. I've also got 3 teenage boys, so it's really relatively limited. I do actually not cut the grass anymore because they've stopped using the football. So I do actually have long grass stroke wildflower in it, which is much nicer. I do cut around the margins so that we have a nice neat edge to the borders, but the main lawn area is in fact left to grow throughout the summer. So I do what I can, but limited, to be fair.
Thank you very much. I'll let you get on with all your other interviews today.
Thanks, Tom.